protagonists, and we also get a good impression of the two dictatorial systems they live in. Nazi Germany with its discrimination of the Jews, and Stalin's Russia with its constant fear of denunciation. Let's first talk a bit about Thomas and Alexander. You described them as very complex personalities, full of ambitions and anxieties. They are not good people in the sense that you would like them. I think, on the contrary, as a reader, it's quite difficult to emphasize with them. So Thomas is a pedant, very sensitive to everything that surrounds him. He can read minds and manipulate them. He's incapable of to love and indifferent towards the lots of others, but wants people to admire him for his talents. His hunger for success finally leads to his downfall. Alexander's belief is that she can save her siblings by cooperating with the regime. She develops quite a talent in interrogating imprisoned dissidents, but gets trapped in a net of delusion and guilt. So how did you develop these differentiated characters, and how close did you feel to them?
Well, there are two very different characters, but with some similarities. So I described the platform for Thomas' character, which came from literary question about characters that I liked, which I described earlier. And Thomas, what's interesting about him, Thomas doesn't have any fantasy about family like Sasha has, and some people, especially in Germany, totally misunderstood the character because they describe him as an opportunist. But he's not just an opportunist. I think that what's interesting with Thomas, that he's a believer. He's like a flash of energy that comes to any organization, and in a way is a subversive element in any organization. But he does it only for himself. It's not with any ideology. And with Thomas, I think that there is an interesting question about what does it mean to be, to stand against the organization, but without any political principles that you should agree with. So I think that Thomas basically, he sees life as a journey to explore your own talents and the boundaries of your own talents, and he's willing to take major risks in order to fulfill this quest. But it's only about this question, about his talent and about his abilities. And this is what's interesting about him, because it's not just a typical German of the 30s, because mostly Thomas was educated in an American company. So he's not, more than he's a Nazi, he's like a true believer in the principles of the American capitalism. So, for example, he interprets the world as a place that you should try to emphasize your individualism and try to pursue your own dreams. So in a way, he's like an American German of the 30s, which is something, in the 30s, there weren't many people like Thomas. But novel is not an imitation of reality. And an historical novel, specifically, Robert Musil once wrote it, that he said, if a historical novel only talks about the historical period, there's no reason to read it. The only time that a historical novel begins to be interesting is that he create this bridge between our time and the historical time, and playing both fields. It's like this. I think this is a good historical novel. You can't really understand if he talks about the historical period of time or he talks about our time. So in a way, I created Thomas, and I know it's like something I decided. I sent him for our time to the historical period as like a subversive element inside the Nazi organization, even though he cooperated, etc., etc. And when the book was published in Germany, I totally understand that I can't talk about Thomas in a complex way. Because all the journalists I met say he's an opportunist, and that was the end of the discussion. He's an opportunist, he's part of the Nazi regime. That was the end of the discussion. In other places like Italy or Norway, the Netherlands, they were more open to understand Thomas in more complex way. For example, in a very good review in Norway, they said, well, Thomas is exactly the kind of guy that will work in consulting firms in our time. And this is a reading that I find interesting. So anyway, and I think that you said that it's very hard to emphasize with him. Well, I don't believe in literature that only works with empathy, because now we will maybe talk about Brecht for a while. I think that Brecht believes in literature that not just try to make you feel, but also try to make you think. And when you totally emphasize with the character, and you see the world only through his eyes, and you believe everything he said, then you lose the critical ability, and you lose the perspective on the character and his actions, and this is the most important thing in literature for me. And for example, you said that Sasha is doing everything in order to save her siblings. Obviously, it's just a story that she tells the reader,
it's an illusion.
And it's not an illusion.
But she illudes herself.
This is the merchandise that the protagonist sells, right? They tell you a story, and you should read behind the lines and see this place of denial and betrayal and lies. And I know that many people read Sasha and totally believe everything she told them. Totally believe the story. It's not about ambition, it's not about becoming a star in the NKVD, it's not about basically Sasha's job in the NKVD. She's a literary editor. She edits confessions, like any editor in a publishing house. So basically, through the NKVD, Sasha became a whole person. Through the NKVD, she fulfilled her talents.
But already in this passage we heard, because you say, I don't think the reader believes in this Lebenslüge. That's Ibsen, she's telling herself, because already here you feel the disdain she has for her father, for example. She mocks him, finally. So there is always this ambivalence. You're never sure if she's really believes herself in this. Her saving her siblings, or is it like she's driven also to do her own thing?
Yeah, I think that the only case, while Thomas, he's celebrating his ambition, and I don't know if in the translation you could see it, but the whole speech he gave to Jack Fisk is a joke. He wasn't serious about anything. He was just selling, he thought this idiot American came to Germany, so I will tell him a story. And I also noticed that they didn't translate one sentence that I truly liked. He told them that his mother will chase lions in the Colosseum before an American will understand anything about the German soul. So it was like, so Thomas and Sasha, they are just telling you stories all the time. But I'm saying that while Thomas celebrating his ambition, and he's not a reflective character, he's not reflective about himself, Sasha is much more sophisticated and reflective, and this is why she can mislead the reader more than Thomas, which he tells you, I'm here to conquer the world, and go to hell if you want to disrupt me. If it's the Nazi regime, the Stalinist regime, he would cooperate with anyone who would give him enough space to grow. But Sasha is much more sophisticated, and this is why many readers tend to believe the story she tells them. But I don't know the answer either, right? I'm just another reader.
You're not, I'm also a reader. Maybe I was also misled now by my next question. Maybe I'm wrong. But I thought, as you said, the characters are very different, but what unites them is the elasticity of the soul, that to say it in your words or the words of the book, people adapt to new circumstances and deny what they believed in before in order to enhance their chances, their happiness, their success. Does this saying of the Elastizität der Seele reflects your idea of man, and is it transferable to all times?
No, it's not my idea. It's a speech that someone gives in the book when he tries to explain history. Yes. By the way, I do like this passage. It's Maxim Podolsky from the NKVD. Yes. So this is the NKVD version to history, and the version is everybody's a liar, everybody's pretending, and we will catch everyone. And so it's not my idea of history. I mean, through the book I learned about the NKVD, and so naturally it's part of me now, the method and the interrogations, but I'm not a representative of the NKVD. or their belief.
No, but I thought it's more in the sense of, elasticity of the soul. Also, the mask you were talking about before. Everybody's wearing a mask, and you never know, is it now another mask, or they change?
No, but this is the question of the book. The question in the book, in Thomas' case specifically, is this thing is just a circle of masks that you keep changing, and you don't know anything about your real face, or do you have any knowledge about your real face, and then the mask is just something that you show the world? And I think that in Thomas' case, this is a very open question. Does Thomas have any face of his own? And I think that obviously, I don't like novels that gives you answer about anything. I think that an interesting novel just opened the landscape of the question. And so I think that this book is very open for interpretations, and I can just say my opinion. So so my idea about the book was to I think a good character in a novel usually is an atypical combination of characters. This is the character that I like. It's not a typical combination of characters. It shouldn't imitate anything that you know. And once John Banville is an author I like, he said that he wrote, I think you know him in Germany, right?
Yes.
So John Banville wrote that he met this author that always was very curious about human beings. So he asked him, why are you so curious about human beings? They're not so interesting. So he said, I'm using human beings to describe characters. So Banville said, this is a third grade author, because the real author doesn't need to imitate people. He's just inventing people and give them qualities, which doesn't mean that I'm a very good author, but I don't try to imitate characters in the world when I write fiction. So in this case, I think that both of them, the combination of the qualities in them are not very typical. But I think that Sasha is someone that it's more easy to emphasize with, because she's very young, and she lost her parents, and she misses her siblings. So it's like everything is wrapped in a very emotional way. But Sasha is not emotional at all.
No, that's why I really had problems to emphasize with her as well, because it's always changing.
This is what I always say to booksellers in Israel. You should not. It's not. If you emphasize or didn't emphasize, it's not the whole question about literature. So you can write. So, for example, I didn't emphasize with Ulrich from The Man Without Qualities, but I still think it's the best ideal novel of the 20th century. And naturally, I think that this thing with empathy towards character became a very, very dangerous test case for bad literature. And this is the way that you connect to the reader. You give him this character, he can identify with it, and this is the end of the story. And I think literature is much more than that. And the American novelists are especially good with these sentimental characters, with history, that you always feel so close to it, and so I don't like this literature. The tradition that I like is, let's say, the more I would say cruel sobriety, like the Russian literature that I like. But this is just a difference. This is why I'm not such a bestseller in Israel or anywhere else.
Before we look at two other passages of the book, I would like to talk a bit more about the time frame of the book. You have chosen the period from the Kristallnacht in November 38 until the German attack on Russia in June 41. Could you explicate a bit how you managed to capture this atmosphere so well, and what did you do? What kind of research did you do? We talked already about the authors that you read, but there must be more to it. This is really...
Usually I tended to exaggerate the research for this book, because people are really amazed by the research. Well, it's not just so difficult. You just need to read books, go to those places and describe them. I think that the interesting part of the novel is the imaginary force of the two occupations, the two careers that I invented for the characters. Both of them are working in occupations that wasn't existed. I invented their career. And specifically, I wanted it to be understandable to the reader that they are not working in any job that was really part of the Nazi or the Stalinist apparatus, that I invented these careers. So the research was very simple, basically. I just read books. I wrote this stuff. I went to Brest-Litovsk and to Leningrad and to Warsaw. And I wanted, in historical novels, for example, of this kind, you can write that China entered the war and conquered Germany, but then it will be an alternative history novel. So I wanted, in a way, to be close to the facts, to the real facts, but also to emphasize the imaginary parts of the novel. And so it wasn't such a difficult task. Yeah. And also I had a good editor. That she knew a lot of stuff about, so she helped me to avoid mistakes. Even though some historians found some mistakes, but not many.
Not many, no, really not. I didn't find any. So, wir wenden uns jetzt wieder dem Buch zu und erleben Alexandra bei ihrer Arbeit für den russischen Geheimdienst, den NKVD. As Nir said, she's an editor of Confessions. So we have this scene now. Eine sehr dramatische Szene. Und danach erleben wir Thomas Heiselberg, der nach großen Erfolgen beim Reichsaußenministerium ausgebotet wird und nun im polnischen Lublin versucht, wieder Tritt zu fassen.